Hey everybody, Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with our weekly lecture series. I want to thank our sponsor, Ricards V, for sponsoring the lecture. Tonight's topic is Sam Shankland, the American Grandmaster. And if you'd like to sponsor a lecture, you can contact my wife, Karen. Her email will be in the video, so you can find her email there. Before we look at Sam's games, I want to talk about him a little bit. And I have a couple of web pages. There's samshankland.com, and there's also his Wikipedia article, which is quite long. The last, 2 or 3 years, I would say Sam is quite well known as a Chessable author. And even on his webpage, you can see it says the Shankland repertoire on Chessable. He has a lot of courses on Chessable, and typically, I don't want to say, but not always, but maybe always, they're for very strong players. So Sam Shankland normally isn't writing Chessable courses for players rated 500, 600, 700. His courses are more for players over 2,000, I would say, and maybe even way over 2,000. Then his information on his career is all on his website, samshankland.com. You can see what he thinks his highlights are, upcoming events of his schedule that he's playing chess, U.S. Championship soon. Then here he lists all of his courses on Chessable. Semislav 1 is important because that's going to be a couple of the games that we look at today. Career highlights, winning U.S. Championship, to me, is his career highlight. He got clear first. That's pretty impressive. He's written a couple of books. So he's an author, he's a Chessable author, chess player, and So this is a pretty nice website, pretty thorough, lots of information about him if you want to become a Sam Shankland fan. Sam Shankland in the last 7 years, I'm going to say, has been one of the top 10 players in the U.S. And probably at his peak, he was probably number 5 in the U.S., which is hard to do nowadays because we have Fabiano Caruana, Wesley So, Linear Dominguez, Karu Nakamura, Levon Aronian, Ray Robson. So it's hard to be in the top 5 in the U.S. But obviously winning the U.S. Championship is very impressive. Okay, and then his Wikipedia article also talks a lot about him. His peak FIDE rating, 2731. That's pretty impressive. And when he was 2731, he was number 24 in the world. And currently he's 2677. So he's number 51 in the world. And again, it talks about his career, his personal life. I've known Sam Shankland for, at least 15 years, at least. And I didn't know until I read his Wikipedia earlier today that he has a degree in economics from Brandeis University. So you learn something new every day. I did know he was on some weird reality show, which they talk about. Kicking and Screaming was the name of the show. I knew he was on some show, but I didn't know the name of it. And finished in 8th place. It doesn't say if there were 100 contestants or 8 contestants. So I'm not sure if 8th place is good. Then a very strange thing for Wikipedia, unless I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, people on YouTube will tell me I'm wrong. They like to do that. His chess career is year by year, think I've seen on Chess Players Wikipedia. So it talks about playing in the World Youth in 2008. Talks about things that happened in the U.S. Junior Championship in 2010. And I was doing live commentary for that event, I think with a V. Friedman. And we had a special guest star joining us for a bit, Gary Kasparov. So I remember Sam from that tournament. Became a grandmaster in 2011. He's from Northern California, so he's played a lot of tournaments in the San Francisco metro area. Talks about his Olympiads, gold medal, etc. So pretty exciting career. Personally speaking, and this isn't really part of his career, but I know Sam Shankland. He was always threatening to quit chess when he was having a tough time early in his career. But as we say in chess, the threat is stronger than the execution. So he's a very emotional person, and he doesn't like to have bad results. As he's gotten older, he stopped doing that, and he is better at having a bad tournament, and doesn't happen very often. Shankland has a lot of good tournaments. And again, you can follow his career on Wikipedia year by year. It tells you the important things that happened. It talks about his chessable courses here. They list them all, which they do on his website, and the books that he's written for quality chess, and so on. So, pretty big Wikipedia article. Discusses a lot about him, as does his website. If you wanted me to discuss his style, Sam likes to do a lot of opening prep. So if you're the kind of person who says, I like player A and I want to play like player A, maybe not Sam Shankland, because if you want to play like Sam Shankland, you better study chess 12 hours a day forever, because opening repertoire and understanding of the openings he plays is world class. And if you want to play like Sam Shankland and play the opening like him, you better do a lot of work. And Shankland is like the poster boy for getting good at chess by doing a lot of work. And that's not something that a lot of people want to hear. They want the magic, I wave my hands, and I make you 500 points better by telling you some bit of wisdom. And the wisdom is you have to work really hard. So it's difficult to emulate Sam Shankland because he studies so much, but you can still appreciate his opening prep and his games. And Sam is trying to get a great position for white out of the opening. He would prefer a winning position. And with black, he wants to get easy position to play where white has no advantage. And he achieves this quite often because of the amount of work that he does preparing his openings. Okay, so let's get to the games, the part of the lecture that we all cherish. Okay, the first game, Shankland has the black pieces. This was played 3 years ago in the St. Louis Rapid. One of the advantages of being one of the top 10 players in the US, as opposed to one of the top 10 players in another country, is the St. Louis Chess Club is in the US. And as a consequence, Sam Shankland has played many events in St. Louis with a lot of the world's best players. And so if you're an up-and-coming junior player and your rating gets to 2,600 and 2,650 and 2,700, you can expect invitations to the St. Louis Chess Club tournaments that have a lot of very strong players. This game, Shankland has black against Mamedyarov. Now, I chose specifically the first two games because I was actually at the second game. Um, I think I was doing commentary on the tournament. On the other hand, I might have been playing in the tournament. I was definitely there. So I don't know if I played in the tournament or did commentary. This game, I was not present. This is a rapid game. Mamedyarov, world-class player. He's been top 10 in the world for many years. And he has the white pieces. So you would expect Shankland would have a tough time against somebody of that strength. Okay, so they played semi-Slav, which Shankland likes to play with both colors, but mainly with black, and he plays the move c6. And this position, white usually plays either e3 or bishop g5. E3 was chosen by Mamedyarov, and he played queen c2. That's sort of a newish move. In the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, and maybe even early 2000s, it was quite common to play bishop d3. Then we would take, because the bishop's already moved, has to move again. b5. Your phone's down here.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was like, I'd never heard that noise before. Karen was finding her phone. Okay, yeah, it must be on the bookshelf. Okay, and this was very common for like 50, 60 years. Then some grandmasters decided that these lines are fine for black. So they started playing other moves like queen c2. And now, if black takes, white hasn't moved their bishop yet. So just go there in one move and white has an extra move. Okay, so now black has to do something else other than taking on c4 and b5. Otherwise, because if black does that, they'll be down a tempo from the main lines. So Shankland plays bishop to d6, b3. White's going to fianchetto their bishop, and bishop e2. And black's bishop on c8 is always a big problem in a lot of Queen's Gambit, semi-Slav, Slav openings, Queen's Pawn openings. And these kinds of positions, it's very good if you're super prepped up. Otherwise, you might think like, should I play rook e8? Should I play queen e7? Should I play b6? Should I play a6? Should I play c5? Should I take? Should I play e5? And you might spend a lot of time figuring out which move you like the best. Shankland doesn't do that. Shankland knows what's in his prep. And there's two difficult things about being a strong grandmaster. One is having the right amount of prep for somebody who's your rating, 2,700 prep. The other is remembering it. I'm not sure which is tougher. Remembering your prep is very difficult. And Sam is pretty good at remembering his prep. So he played b6. He's going to fianchetto his bishop. And he does. Bishop b2. Queen e7. And this position looks boring, but actually, once people start breaking in the center, black has two center breaks, and white has one center break. Lots of trades will happen. Pieces will get more active because the pawns won't be in the way, and the game will become very interesting. And I often say this when I do commentary for Super GM games. A lot of times, the first 10, 15 moves are super exciting. Everybody's like, yay, this is going to be a decisive game. But actually, it's just prep, and it peters down to an equal position. And sometimes we have games like this where there's no trades, and it looks boring, but then things happen in the middle game to make it less boring, and we have a really exciting game. So often, you can't tell in the first 10, 15 moves whether we're going to have an exciting game or not. However, since you're watching this lecture, you better believe the game's going to be exciting. Okay, so Mamedyarov put his rook in the middle. Shankland did the same. And Mamedyarov decided something's got to give, and he played e4. Obviously, white is threatening e5, forking the bishop and knight. So they did some trades on e4. I'm sure Sam still knows this position, still part of his prep, and plays f5. And f5 is the kind of move that if you play it and you don't know it, it could lead to disaster. But if it's part of your prep and you understand the position, you can really open things up and get an initiative. In this position, the key to everything is whether or not black plays c5. You can imagine the next 10 moves, that pawn is still on c6. Bishop on b7 is terrible. So black obviously can't play c5 now because his bishop would be hanging. So he plays f5, kicking the queen off of e4. And later in the game, black can play e5 or c5 or both and activate their pieces. Queen goes to e3, which keeps an eye on e5 and c5 and c5. And now this bishop, which heretofore was behind the c-pawn, is now quite good. And if I was a betting man, I would say that Shankland probably has this position in his preparation. Okay, rook e1. White's going to put the heavy pieces on the e-file and try to punish Sam for weakening his e6 pawn. Takes on d4. Knight takes, threatening the e6 pawn. And e5. So what black has a nice center. Black has a nice bishop. Black has solved all of his opening problems. And typically, when Sam Shankland is playing for his side, there are no opening problems because he knows openings very deeply. Knight b5, attacking the bishop. Bishop c5, attacking the queen. And queen g3. So a very big success for black out of the opening. Black has a big center. Black's pieces are all active. And white's pieces aren't very cohesive. A queen over there and a knight over there. A bishop on e2, blocking the rook on e1. White has no center pawns. So very successful for Shankland. Shankland plays f4, very aggressive move, trying to punish white for having their queen, willy-nilly running around the board. Queen h3. Now at least the queen can't be attacked. And knight f6, improving the knight's position. Black wants to attack f2 pawn. Bishop on c5. And the knight on e4. Looked like a pretty good attacking duo. Knight c3, which makes knight e4 not as strong for black. And Shankland sacrifices his bishop. And Shankland, in one of his many interviews I've seen, and I've given Shankland interviews, he said he used to be not accurate in finding tactics, and he would look at a move like bishop f2 and be like, I don't know, that gives up the bishop. Maybe I won't do that. And then as he got older, he realized he has to calculate those moves and see if they work. Because if they work, then they work. King takes f2 is forced. And bishop c8. Bishop c8, very difficult to find. And you could see why somebody might not sacrifice their bishop because they wouldn't look at a retreating move. And the idea of bishop c8, not only it attacks the queen, if the queen goes to the most obvious square, queen h4, now knight e4 check wins the queen. And that's the point of bishop f2, forces the king to f2, so now white can't play queen h4. If Shankland had reversed his sacrifice and bishop c8 and gone here, first, after queen h4, you can't play bishop f2 because I take with the queen. So only Shankland's move order works. And the queen can't go to h4, but you got to move the queen. Your queen's hanging. So instead, he played rook takes d8 because he can't play queen d3 because his queen would be hanging on d3. And if he plays queen f3, then I could check. You would play king f1. I hope you play king f1. And then I play knight g4, and I'm threatening knight h2 checkmate and knight e3 check, which would win the game with taking all of white's pieces with discovered check. Okay, Mamedyarov didn't like that, but that's the only places his queen can go. So he traded rooks first, and Shankland just took back. White has more than enough material if we take the queen and they take the rook and they take the bishop. Black's pieces are all gone. White has a rook and 2 pieces for a queen, although I'm not sure who's better here. White's king is pretty bad and black has 2 passed pawns. But Shankland just recaptured the rook. Again, the queen has some issues, and he played g4. He didn't like the aforementioned line that I gave because black is still threatening knight e3 and knight takes h2. Knight h2 is mate. So instead he played g4, rook to d2, threatening the bishop on b2, and just as important, we're pressuring the g4 pawn because the bishop on e2 is pinned. So this is looking really bad for white. And Shankland correctly realized that the bishop sacrifice on f2 would give him more than enough compensation for the piece. Rook d1, bishop takes g4, threatening the queen on h3. And in this position, Mamedyarov resigned because if he saves his queen, which isn't easy, man, queen g2 runs into f3. Queen f1, I don't know. Then I could take on b2. Black is up 2 pawns. Black has 2 connected passed pawns. White's king is on f2. Ridiculous position for white. So after bishop takes g4, Mamedyarov resigned. A nice, relatively easy win with black against one of the world's elite players. So good game from Shankland, and that's why I included it in the lecture. I didn't want to show Shankland beating up on 2,000 players. I wanted to show him beating the best players. Okay, now, same kind of opening, although actually, okay, first of all, I want the notation gone. And this isn't the game I wanted to show. Oh, this is the game I wanted to show. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, and the next game is against Sergey Karjakin. Played for the World Championship a few years ago. Recently has had some bad press supporting Russia in the war, and not the most liked chess player. And this was played 2 years ago at Tata Steel in the Netherlands. I've played there before you guys were born. Before Shankland was born? Probably. Okay, so Shankland has the white pieces. So we'll flip the board against Karjakin. And they played way into Shankland's prep. And that's not something you want to do, even if you're a world champion candidate. Okay, so they played Nimzo Indian, which I'm currently writing a course for Chessable, for the black side. And Shankland played f3. I think today I covered the chapter with f3. f3 threatens to play e4. And I suggested the move c5 for black in my course. And that's what Karjakin played. White played d5, which I said was the best move. And in this position, Karjakin played b5, which is okay. And I suggest b5 in a lot of different variations in the f3 line because we're trying to crush white's center, although not exactly in this position. So leaving my course. No wonder Karjakin didn't do well. Okay, so the c pawn is defending the d pawn. So if you take, black can take either way on d5 and get their pawn back right away. And white played f3 for a reason. Wanted to play e4. And Shankland has the big center. d6. Bishop to d2, unpinning the knight. a6, and I never give a6 before the capture on b5 in my course. That seems too slow to me. I don't like a6. a4, attacking the b pawn. And they trade on c4. And I wish my a6 pawn was on a7, so I would have the a6 square for my pieces. I don't like the move a6. Knight bd7. Shankland takes the pawn. White's a pawn ahead. And Karjakin gets counterplay, wants to play knight d3 check. Bishop takes c8. Queen takes c8. Black's down a pawn, and black has pretty good compensation with all of their active pieces. Bishop f4, protecting the d3 square with the queen. c4, Karjakin not only wants to play knight d3, but now he has the c5 square for his pieces. Probably going to be difficult for Shankland to castle soon. Shankland gets rid of the knight and plays knight h3. He wants to play knight f2 and defend the d3 square so black's knight can't go there, or at some point black's rook. And knight on f2 defends this weak square. And Shankland's like, I'm up a pawn. What's the problem? Bishop c5. Karjakin says the problem is you can't castle. Queen e2. It doesn't threaten the c4 pawn, because if white plays queen c4, black plays bishop f2 check, and wins the queen with a discovered attack. But it looks like maybe Shankland wants to castle queenside. Or Shankland could play knight f2 and then castle kingside. Rook b8. Does play knight f2. Castling queenside looks too dangerous. Queen b7. Castles. Karjakin says, yay, I won back my pawn. And Shankland says, nope. And plays queen c4, a piece sacrifice. So this is an amazing piece sack because now black is the one in trouble with the king on e8, and white's king is tucked away on h1. And I'm assuming when Karjakin played rook b8 and queen b7, he thought, when I take the pawn on b2, material equality is established, and I like my position. My bishop on c5 is good, and my opponent can't take on c4 because bishop takes f2 wins a piece. And then Shankland took on c4. So Karjakin won the piece. If you take the bishop, your rook is hanging in the corner. So Shankland has to play king h1. And this position, this king is never going to castle. Queen e6 is annoying. And the most annoying is rook b1, which skewers the queen and the rook. And you can't move your queen anywhere because your queen has to defend your bishop on f2. So Karjakin has some problems. And great calculation by Shankland to sacrifice a piece and realize his position here is quite good. Karjakin played queen b3. His idea is, if we trade queens and you take my bishop, now I take your knight, and I'm winning the endgame. Okay, so Shankland played queen to c7. And again, Shankland is threatening rook b1 with the skewer. And now Shankland can safely capture the bishop on f2. And also queen takes g7 looks quite annoying to me. Karjakin played queen b6, defending his bishop on f2, attacking the queen on c7. Queen takes e5 check. king f7. It looks like black is escaping. Maybe Shankland's piece sack was unsound. And knight to d5. Again, the queen is stuck to the defense of the bishop. So if we play something like queen e6, Shankland just goes into the ending, and white is up 2 pawns. So, and white could be up 1 pawn by taking on f2. That might even be better. So Karjakin wants to save his bishop. He plays knight takes d5. If he plays something like queen c5, we just attack the queen again. And here comes the rook to c7. That's not looking good for black. So he plays knight takes knight, getting rid of one of the attackers. Queen takes check. Again, you can't block with the queen because you need to defend your bishop on f2. So he plays king to e7. White plays queen e5 check, threatening the g-pawn and the king. King f7. And now Sam plays the very simple rook c1. This is an amazing position because it's very obvious what the threat is, and there's no way to stop it. So in this position, white wants to play rook c7 check, which leads to mate. And if black plays the really obvious either rook to c8, doesn't matter which one, that rook is hanging because I trade rooks and then I play queen f5 check, picking up the rook. So you can't play rook c8 and you can't allow rook c7. So basically the truth hurts. You can't do anything good. If you play rook b7, which stops rook c7, now I check and your back rank isn't defended by your rook on b8 because you moved your rook to b7. If the king goes forwards, then rook c6 is forking the king and queen. If the king goes backwards, then rook c8 check is winning immediately. So black has to play king e7, and rook c6 ends the game. We're attacking the queen, and we're threatening queen e6 check and rook c8 mate. Also, the queen is supposed to stay on the bishop, which it can't do. So really, there's no move here. The king is just too exposed. The rook is useless. White's king, which early in the game was very dangerously placed on e1, found a really safe square on h1, and somehow Sam turned it around and got his own attack. So after the move, rook c1, in this position, Karjakin resigned. So again, world-class players, Mamedyarov and Karjakin, losing to Sam Shankland, and I want to say brutally so. Just crushed. Okay, not Wesley so, but brutally so. Okay, nice game. Okay, and Sam Shankland's not known for his endgame, but I like this endgame a lot. When this game was played, it was 2008, and this was in the World Youth Under 18. And I coached the World Youth Under 18 and 16 and 14 and 12. But that was like in 2012, 13, 14, 15. 2008 was before my time. I wasn't coaching then, I was playing. Shankland was 24-36, and he was playing Quang Liêm, who's 25-83. Later, Quang became World Blitz champion, and he's best player from Vietnam, and he's lived in the U.S. for many years. And he's won many tournaments. And they're both under 18 in this tournament, and they get this rook and pawn ending with equal pawns, and it gets super exciting. I've never seen this ending before I prepared this lecture when I was having a look at his best games, and I really like this endgame. Black played obvious king g4, attacking the rook. I would say Shankland's move is obvious, rook e3, threatening the pawn on e7. And this position, I didn't use an engine, but it seems clear to me that this was the losing move. And I think perhaps black is okay if they play rook to b7, defending their pawn. But instead, Quang played rook e8, and now white finishes the game brilliantly with everybody getting several queens. And by everybody getting several queens, I'm kidding, but it looks like it. And rook e8's very passive, and rook b7's very passive, but you can't allow rook takes e7. So he had to pick which one he wanted to do, and he picked the wrong one. Now Shankland did a breakthrough, which usually you only see in puzzles, not in actual games. He played c5. And here comes the pawn avalanche. We can't let white take on d6 because this is pinned. We can't let white play c6, b6. Okay, so black has to take. And now the point of c5 was to play d6. Okay, and everybody has a lot of passed pawns. Black played e5. We can't take en passant. That's not how en passant works. And black is up a pawn. So that looks good for black. And then b6, and we have 5 passed pawns. Unfortunately for Quang, white's passed pawns are on the 6th rank, and black's passed pawns are on the 4th and 5th rank. And it doesn't matter how many you have, you only need 1 queen. Once you're up 1 queen, that's enough to be up. h3, his pawn's on the 6th rank. d7, the rook must move. And then b7. And the pawns protect each other. We can never take this pawn because we promote. And you can't go here and take this pawn because I promote the other pawn. But black has a pawn too. So h2. In this position, the arbiter stopped the game because it was too exciting. It turned out the arbiter was Zoidberg. Not a good arbiter. Although better than a lot of FIDE arbiters. Okay, Shankland played rook e1, stopping the h pawn. And Quang decided to go back, which loses the game. I think the best that he could hope for is to be down a rook and try to give a perpetual. So I think if black plays king g3, I play rook b1, you play king g2, I queen, you take my queen, you queen, and I queen, and black is down a rook. And black doesn't have a lot of checks here. Black's king is not well placed for checking white. Black would have to check forever, and I think the white king can easily hide behind the black pawns, and the queen can block. So I'm sure this is winning for white. In fact, by doing analysis without an engine, which is not my forte, after queen check, the only check that doesn't hang the queen, king b2, that's it. No more checks. And white's extra rook should win the game. Okay, so that's one way black could play, and I guess he saw that if he played king g3, king g2, he would be down a rook and losing. So he played king f5, and he decided, let's play defense. We'll go here, and we'll queen, and we'll take these pawns, and something good will happen. Shankland played rook b1. He wants to get to that endgame where he's up a rook. Rook b8. And now white can't play queen and then queen the other pawn because now white's losing. Black is too quick. Makes a queen of their own. So Quang has stopped the b pawn. Here comes Quang's king. And I guess in a perfect world for black, black would actually win. Black could pick up both pawns and still have these 2 pawns left. Okay. Shankland played rook d1, threatening the queen. Rook d8. It looks like they're going to repeat and have a draw. Always repeat. And instead, Shankland plays king c3, plays for the win. So Shankland repeats, then plays king c3. White's play is obvious. Just move the king up and win the game. Problem black has, if black plays king e6, we're still not threatening to take because pawn's queening. So he did take on d7, which is a blunder, and he thought rook takes rook, queen, queen, black has good chances for perpetual check. I don't think black has perpetual. Well, actually, I say that, but I guess queen c1 is winning for black. Then the king can't go to b3 because of queen b1 check, and king d3, queen d1 check, and white is fighting for a draw and probably won't get it. So that's what Quang's hoping for. He realized if he plays king e6, king c4, that's not going to end up well. And if he queens and takes with the king, I check and play rook takes d8 and I win. So instead he played rook takes d7, which is a blunder. And hopefully you can all see the winning move for Shankland. Shankland did. And that's rook f1 check. And then we promote next move, and that's it. So elementary blunder at the end of the game in a lost position, and Shankland wins. Very exciting. We went from sort of a boring rook ending to 5 passed pawns with 3 passed pawns on the 7th rank. And these pawns didn't help black. Okay, and last but not least, okay, this is one of Shankland's most famous games, but not for the reasons he wanted it to be. We'll flip the board since Shankland was black. And I will say, without fear of being contradicted, from here till the end of the game, both sides played perfect. And this is Giri versus Shankland. So I was told to show Shankland's best games. If he's playing perfect, that's about as good as I can do. Giri took the queen, and Shankland played rook f4, which is correct. And they got to this ending where black is up a pawn, but the bishop is better than the knight, and black has all these pawns that could be captured by the bishop. So white's playing for a win. e5. We have to take that pawn. Bishop takes. We can't play g5 and defend our pawn because that's illegal. And you can't save this pawn. So he played knight g6, saving his f pawn. Bishop c7. b5, forcing white to double their pawns if they want to win their pawn back. Good move by Shankland. Both sides get their kings up. Knight check. Otherwise, white just takes a pawn and white's a pawn ahead. King e5. Giri wants to somehow get his king over here and win the b pawn. King e7. Shankland says no. Check. King e6. White has a much better king. g5. Black wants to trade all the pawns off. King d7. Shankland goes for the h pawn. And finally, he wins the h pawn. And Giri plays the move, which looks like it wins. Bishop e3, and the knight is trapped on h3. Shankland plays king d6 and says, hey, let's take these pawns, and then I won't lose. King f5. Giri wants to win the knight on h3. Shankland plays king to d5. At some point, white's going to have to play b6 because I'm going to go here and take your pawns. So the only way to save the b5 pawn is to play b6. And you can't save the b4 pawn because if you go here and defend your b4 pawn with the bishop, then the knight can get out. And in fact, even here the knight can get out. And then we take the pawn here and we have to play b6, which I indicated earlier. We always have to play b6. Okay, so in this position, Giri just played b6, knowing that he would have to play it eventually. And that saves his pawn. The knight on h3 is trapped. And unfortunately, especially in the Sam Shankland lecture, Shankland resigned here. And I was told by the sponsor to show Sam Shankland's best games. Sam Shankland did nothing wrong this game. So this is one of his best games. But what he did do wrong is he resigned. And I tell my students never resign, but Shankland's not my student. And in this position, after Shankland resigned, Giri shook his hand, they signed the score sheets, and Giri looked at Shankland and said, this position is a draw. And Shankland knew if his king got to A8 that this is a book draw. But he correctly realized he can't get to A8. Okay, for example, in this position, white plays bishop F4, and the king can't get to A8. If the king got to A8, black would play king B8, king A8, draw, and if he can't play king B8, it's stalemate. Shankland knew that, Giri knew that, Shankland knew he couldn't get to A8, so he resigned. Then Giri pointed out that you don't have to get your king to A8, you can get your king to C8 and draw, and this position is a draw. Black moves the king to these three squares, and there's nothing white can do about it except stalemate black. White is up a ton of material here. White's up a bishop and a pawn. And we can stop the king from going to the corner, and there's no way for white to win, which is very strange, although Giri knew that. King E7 is stalemate, so I'll play king D8, I'll play king C8, and if you make king G8 illegal, that's okay, I have king D7. If you make king D8 and king D7 illegal, that's stalemate.